Hey, good morning from Ohio or wherever you are in the world, because obviously it could be afternoon or evening for you, but excited to have you here. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the flow of life. and I literally just met this person who's going to share today. But it's kind of like, are you in your joy? Are you in your flow? Or are you in that struggle? And of course, right now, we're in such uncertain times with things. And I'm sure you've all heard that, right? In case you didn't know that. But what we're going to talk about is how is it that we get into the energy and the flow of our lives for ourselves, for our families, and, for the world. And I just met Alexandra, who's going to come on and talk to us today. And I'm excited for you to meet her. Before I do, though, let me just tell you that my name is Cheryl Bassett, and I'm founder of Unstoppable Connections, international bestseller, and creator of the award-winning Unstoppable Family Meeting Toolkit. I am also the host to this show, Kitchen Table Conversations, as part of the Global One Network and the Edge Network. Now, families do get to tap into my four gifts, which is my heart to share, and has everything to do with how a family can become unbreakable, unshakable, and build that foundation of trust. So if you would like to learn more about the work I do around the four gifts and for connecting families, you can go to unstoppableconnections.com. Now, if you have an idea for the show or you'd like to be on the show, just go ahead and jump over to kitchentableconversations.com and reach out. I'd love to hear from you. So what we do when we do a show is we always set an intention. We do that because I just feel like it's really important to ground it. What this show does is it covers everything from the fun stuff to the tough stuff and everything in between, but every single bit of it's designed to ignite conversations, to strengthen our families, and to create a positive ripple out into the world. So what I do is I tap into one of the gifts that I get to share, one of the four gifts. It's the gift of love. And we unwrap the gift of love by choosing to celebrate ourselves and others. It's with that heart and open mind that we come here in a true celebration of every person who comes here to share with us, because they share their beauty, their heart, and their talent. And so with that, what I want to do is ask you to welcome with me, Alexandra. Let me just tell you a little bit about her before I bring her on. I did have to roll through this with her to make sure I was pronouncing everything correctly this morning. So she'll let me know if I didn't, but I think I'll do close enough here. Alexandra was born in Chicago to a Celtic and Ashkenazi Jewish family. Having always had a great interest in spirituality and a love for nature, which I do too, by the way, it was only natural that her personal and professional lives would be centered around these areas. As a young adult, she moved to Ocala National Forest in Florida, where she studied yoga, meditation, and spiritual philosophy. There, she lived in a cabin in the middle of a forest for 3 years. I'm not sure I could do that, while simultaneously working as the director of business development for the Amrit Yoga Institute. In 2017, she moved to Israel from the forest to receive her double major in sustainability and government. While studying, she worked as a VIP ambassador for the Paris Center. Currently, she is the co-founder of Hydria Water Innovations, which we're going to talk a little bit about, an environmental impact-based water consultancy and distribution firm. She is out of Israel, Spain, and the USA, and teaches on spirituality, philosophy, and everyday life. So anyway, I just met her. I was so excited to bring her and introduce you to her. So let me just bring her on now. Welcome,
Hi.
Alexandra.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor.
Well, we were just on a call a couple of weeks ago, and as soon as we were done, I was like, oh my gosh, what you shared, and just the things that I wasn't aware of, but I thought how empowering it would be for our families to also have the same information. So was really excited to have you do that. I do not know how you could live in a forest for 3 years, but I'm assuming you could get out of the forest and actually be out with the flow of life beyond the forest. But I'm sure that had to be an amazing experience as well.
It was actually quite profound to leave the urban environment or the suburban environment that most of us are so well accustomed to and that I grew up in. And everyone has their own path. But for me, being able to come to the quiet of nature and come to the quiet of myself was very crucial in helping me move forward in my path. And for most people, I think it would be challenging because you're with yourself and nature mostly.
So did you have internet or no internet?
We had internet,
Okay.
but there was no cell towers in the area. So any phone calls had to be off of the internet only. And if there was a hurricane, for example, and internet went down, that was just it. You just lived off the land. And
That's beautiful. I think that's so great. So I want to kind of jump in to, again, some of the things you were talking about and sharing on our call last week, but I know that we also talked about you kind of sharing these 5 like ways to kind of energize your life and really in a way that it impacts yourself, your family, and others around you and the world ultimately. So I'm just going to let you kind of pick where you want to start, because I know you had sent me 5 kind of areas that we were going to touch into. So why don't you jump into some of that in terms of what you had in mind for these 5 areas that we're going to talk about today.
Okay. So one of the areas, and the first one, is living values. And it's meant to be a double entendre, meaning that values are actually living, breathing principles or aspects that infuse our day-to-day lives and infuse nature and the world around us. And the other side of that is the empowering nature of living your values and making that a center point of your life. And this first one is really what leads into the other 4 points. And what I'll say is, you mentioned in the intro, we've been living in challenging times for a lot of people. And this time, once you are in the empowered kind of vessel situation of where you're living your values, meaning maybe that could be compassion or justice or patience or kindness or truth or enlightenment, whatever the case may be. If you are living and breathing these things and you bring these values into how you relate to yourself, how you relate to others, and how you relate to the external world, nature, and also society, then you have a really, really empowered base from where you can move forward. And it almost allows you to become an unshakable person, meaning that no matter what's going on within your relationships or what you see on the news, you are strong in your values.
Yeah, so it's kind of like just, I always say all the time when, like, if people are watching the TV all the time and it's making them feel bad, I'm like, turn it off. It's not that hard to just turn it off and not be in that energy, right? But at the same time, it is, I think, like you're saying, standing there, even if it is on, even if things are going on around you that don't feel like, the energy you want to be in, you can stay in your space. And I think that when you can reach that, that's really truly being in harmony with yourself and with your values. So yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about, although one of the things I wanted to say was that I assume to get to these values that you're talking about, is that where people are doing like a lot of internal work because when you say to somebody, what's your values? I would think a lot of people might go, I don't know. I don't really know. Like, I hadn't really thought about it, right? A lot of people don't do that. So I'm assuming that a lot of that comes from doing meditation and that type of work.
Yeah, meditation and gaining experiential knowledge is a great way to do that. I will say that most of the values, even the examples that I gave before, if you look at any spiritual or religious tradition since the beginning of mankind, these are the tenets of the values that they ask you to live by. And that's getting knowledge, that there's one thing about getting that knowledge that these are the values that you are being asked to live by or suggest to live by. But something that might even be more experience is the experiential knowledge of doing that inner work of what are my values. So for example, if one, and I would suggest that one of the best ways to figure out your values is to say, what do I want to see in the world? Do you want to see compassion in the world? Do you want to see justice? What are the values that mean the most to you? But here's the tricky part. When you come to living them, and let's say you've realized that compassion is one of the key values you want to see blossom in the world. So one of the challenges with that could actually be when you see something going on in the world that you find very unjust and very hard to be compassionate about, then you still have to hold that space of compassion. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, you're actually allowing yourself to become a channel or a vessel for compassion to be grounded into the world. It's harder when the rubber hits the road. Mm-hmm. But that's why it starts internally.
Yeah. So I love all that. And I love that, what do I want to see in the world as a way to start? Because I'm even thinking if a family, and of course, if kids are really young, this might be like, they may not be thinking that way, although our kids today are so amazing in terms of how they view the world in ways that we haven't, because of just, I feel like they enter into this life, I think, with some awareness of that already. But asking that question could be really profound. And I would think it's something that even if you don't know the answer right away, it's something to really just spend some time on, even just having those conversations as a family and talking about what that gets to look like. So, okay. So I know that was like the first thing that you had down here, and then we kind of moved into your next point, which I'll let you elaborate on.
Okay. So the second one is values will return. And what this means is that on a micro and macro level, meaning like within an individual person and also within the world, everything returns. Everything is cyclical. So in physics, they say that there's no new energy created. It's a process of transformation of energy. If you look at the water cycle, for example, the process of moving from condensation to evaporation and back and forth, everything is in return. So when you live your values, which, like I said, can be hard to do when the rubber hits the road, but having compassion in a time or a situation when it's hard to have compassion, knowing that that values will return to you by your decision to embody this value is something that makes it easier to move through the harder times in life.
Right.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's really about trust, right? Mm-hmm. It's about trusting and knowing that if your values are really there, even if you have moments where they feel a little lost, the trusting that they will return. And that everything is cyclical. There's no question to that, right? It always comes kind of full circle. I feel like there's a lot of that happening right now. Things that people had kind of lost even some of their values around in terms of what was most important to them. When we've had some of the last year unfold, I feel like people have returned to some of those values and remembering what really is important, right? So that's kind of that cyclical experience that's happened for a lot of people, I think, even just recently. Okay. So what do we want to see in the world? How do we, trusting that our values that we do want to see in the world will return, and staying in that trusting space. And then you have your third thing, which I guess is detaching. So what is that about?
So it's detaching from the results. So if you look at living your values and having the trust that values will return, that those can be done. But if you're attached to the results of these values will return to me, or they will return to me within the time frame within which I expect, this can be problematic, because this is actually living values and moving through these steps is actually about personal empowerment. It's about becoming this unshakable being where, regardless of what the results are of you sticking true to your values, you stay true to your values, no matter what's going on. Mm-hmm. If you see an injustice going on, or even an injustice going on to you, but justice is one of your values, if you allow yourself to detach to the end results, but at the same time continue to be just, and if compassion is another one, and then have compassion to the injustice done to you, this allows for a very empowered person, very empowered family and society, if this is taken from an individual level, but it starts from the individual. But you have to stay true to yourself and true to your values and true to what does it mean for me to live this, as opposed to well, this is my value and I want to make that person be just. I want to make that person be compassionate. There's no power in that.
Right.
You don't have control over that. You do have control over yourself, which actually leads to the fourth point, which I'll just mention real quickly, is doing so sincerely and faithfully, which you also mentioned. To continue to live the values, have this trust that they will return, not attached to the end results, but do it sincerely and faithfully with faith.
Yeah, I love all that. You're right. It kind of just keeps flowing into these points you're bringing up, right? They sort of just flow into each other. Because if you're really standing in that trusting space that they will return and whatever, then it's obviously it is standing in faith, right? And so I love how this just this is called the beautiful flow of life for a reason, right? And it is about just staying in that flow, because if you're trying to control, and it's funny because I know sometimes people get really attached to outcomes, right? And then they're let down or they're disappointed or it wasn't what they thought. Sometimes it's even better. But if you just allow, I constantly do this align and allow. And it's just staying in that alignment, and probably same thing, staying in that trusting space, right? And then allowing, because I think sometimes we actually limit what could unfold by trying to control like an outcome we want to see, but there could be something even better. And I feel like I know when we had, and of course I know you because of Joy, Lucinda, but hers was like the unexpected of the grand adventure kind of thing, right? Like allowing those big amazing things to come into your life. But when you start saying, I'll give you an example, because I really want people to understand this. So my son one time was going for a job, and he was doing these powerful why statements of why am I getting this job, right? Like trying to put out to the universe, this is why, like, why am I getting this job? And I said, what? I said, I think like this job could be awesome, but maybe there's something even better. Should you not, like, let's open this up and say, why is the perfect job coming into my life, right? And because he was so attached to that one job that he set himself up for, like, it was either going to be a win or a loss, right? Instead of allowing the unfolding. And what's interesting about that is he switched it, and he ended up in a different job that I think was a much better fit for him, but he got lasered in on one. Instead, we opened that up and just said, why is the perfect job appearing into my life? And so I think it's about standing in that space of, more that allowing and not being attached to a certain outcome, because the outcome could be even better.
Absolutely. And there's like a little quote or meme that I love, that like the bird standing on a branch doesn't have faith in the branch. It has faith in its own wings, even if the branch breaks.
Yeah.
And I think that's so absolutely true. And if you allow yourself to be centered in your values, there is a process of inner growth that will continue to happen over time. So the next time that maybe being attached to the outcome of getting a job or not, your son or anyone in that experience wouldn't have the same experience or the attachment. And it really can showcase profound aspects in life, like you said.
Yeah, I love that. That's one I'm definitely going to post out in the group. I think that's beautiful. So, and I'll find the meme on it, but it's just basically the bird that's sitting in the tree doesn't have faith in the branch. It has faith in its own ability in its own wings and its own ability to fly. And what a beautiful analogy that is. So great. Love that. Okay. So now we are moving into the, we've done I don't know. Do you have more that you wanted to cover in the sincerely and faithfully, or are we on to the last one?
We are on to the last one, but I do want to say something beforehand, which is that when we look around, we've all noticed and experienced for ourselves, I definitely have, how much suffering can take place due to things that happen inside of us as individuals, or issues within interpersonal relationships, or even suffering looking external to see what's happening in the world. And I just want to cement this aspect of the bird having faith in its wings again, in light of this, when you look at what's going on in with the ecosystem, for example, or what's going on with different social justice matters. It doesn't mean that there aren't things to be solved, but I would highly suggest that in dealing with yourself, your family, and the world around you, if you're dealing with them through this solidification of values and you act for change from the solidification of values, the amount of suffering that you can experience in any given day will be so greatly minimized. It's hard to fathom. You know, like Martin Luther King, he worked very hard for change. He didn't have to like what was happening, but he still loved his persecutors. And that was a value that he lived. So before we move into the flow, I just wanted to solidify that point, because I do know that this has been a challenging time for people.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've shared this before, but like when you wake up in the morning, right, you can look at the world and there are injustices, but there's also beauty, and we get to choose which one gets our energy. And I think that's what you're sharing right now is that which one do we want to strengthen? Because that which we focus on, we strengthen. So again, going back to you, what do you want to see in the world? That's where your energy should be, right? That's where your focus should be. So it's not that there aren't other things going on. It's just which one are you feeding, right? On a daily basis.
It's absolutely true. And going back to that everything will return, if you do put out too much anger and negativity towards what you don't like, you're actually putting more negativity out there. And so it becomes much more empowering to become that which you want to see, as opposed to fighting what you don't want to see. And in that process of becoming, that is where we each as individuals have the power to change the world one by one.
Yeah. So the flow with life is the last point we had here. And one of the things that I thought you might want to do too is tie in, because obviously when I met you like a couple weeks ago, part of it was, and it's not surprising, right, that you're dealing with water, which is completely about the flow. And of course I share about the ripples and how it is we get to create those in our lives and what that gets to look like for us and how we can be a positive ripple or a negative one, but we want to be a positive one. But just if you would like maybe go ahead and tie from this flow of life that we're talking about into some of the stuff that you're doing around the water piece a little bit too, because I feel like that's another whole area. We could probably do another whole show on that, but I'd love for you to just touch on it just a little bit.
Sure. So I have co-founded an environmental impact-based water consultancy and distribution company with one of my best friends in the world, who also has a very similar thought process on this. And when I say environmental impact-based, this is kind of sustainability jargon, if you will. What it means is that in all of the aspects of our business, we are looking to how can we make the greatest impact, make the greatest difference in the environment, make the greatest impact in people's lives, animals' lives, plants' lives, through our business and through our work. And to do so, we actually consult about technologies that can really help slow down these processes within climate change and can really help lead to a more harmonized world. What I will say about how this relates to the flow of life, in living my values and coming to these crux moments of understanding what my values were and are, this is what led me to understand the areas in which I would like to make the most difference. Also led me to my co-founder of the business, because by sticking to my values in all the aspects of my life, it made it easier to find those who have the same values. And great impact can come in numbers like that as well. And
Yep.
these kinds of conversations about the flow of life and about this kind of crystallization of embodying values are things that we have in our business meetings. And imagine that moving from an individual level into a family or into a business. And I know that, I just like you talked about the ripples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, when I share my dot at the end, it's all about the ripple, because obviously that's what we get to create. But so one of the things that I know, and again, I feel like this will be another whole topic we can do at some point, or maybe we'll do some quick hit segments inside. But I know statistically, like the water crisis that you went through, right, where you were, because you're in Israel, some of those things are about to unfold here, right? And it's not so much like it's just what's happening, and this is not to have a discussion about why it's happening or whatever. It's not a political discussion, but it's an awareness discussion about the fact that these things are starting to happen. And so some of the solutions that you are providing, because I know you came on and talked to a whole group of us that are called 30 Grid, which is really going to be spas and ranches and beautiful locations all over the United States and maybe some out, but to put in some of these solutions right around this. And I don't know if there's something quick hit that, like, if you were going to give families, like if they wanted to go just learn more, is that your website? Is that is there a book that you would recommend if they wanted to learn more about just like how can we be more prepared a little bit for those types of things?
So you're right. I am in Israel, and Israel has faced huge, devastating water crises throughout its history, but have more water security than many countries who used to be rich in water. And now over time, due to overpumping, due to overpopulation, due to overcontamination, whatever reason, there are becoming more and more issues within water security. And what happened in Israel is that necessity is the mother of innovation. They say that in the book, The Startup Nation. But it's been very, very true here in Israel. And I think that the story of what happened in Israel, the water story here, should give a lot of hope to people who are in countries that are for the first time now starting to face water scarcity issues, water crises, to know that it can be adapted, and it can be adapted for the better. For example, because of the water crisis here in Israel, over 95% of tap water, of used tap water, is now cleaned and is used as water for agriculture. It's not drinking, but over 95%, which means that we're wasting so little water here, which is a value that should be implemented in the world, to not waste, to honor our resources. So my hope is that we'll see this happen more and more around the world, and that this crisis will actually be a point where these values can be implemented. And if people do want to find out more, they can go to our website, hydriawaterinnovation.com. And I do want people to know that there is hope in this regard. It doesn't always seem that way if you turn on the news, but allow hope to be one of your values as well.
Yes, beautiful. So, okay, so we are at that point. And again, I feel like there's so much knowledge that you have in that space. And I would love for us to kind of delve into that at some point too. Right now, I just wanted to at least touch on it. Check out the website, hydriawaterinnovations.com. Learn a little bit more about it. I feel like one of the values sometimes that I feel like we definitely need here is to be able to have more awareness. Like it's just too easy to just stick our head, in the sand and act like nothing's going on. But there's a lot to learn, and again, but it's definitely staying in the energy of what is possible, what you want to see, and whatever. But obviously, it is about stepping into awareness around it, so you can actually choose that, right? So anyway, Hydria Water Innovations, definitely check it out. So great to have you here. I love this conversation. I feel like the way you even share is just so flowing. Like You're definitely in the flow of life. Your energy is, and I love that. And I think that was why it's probably so attracted to you, because I feel like sometimes right now people do need to just take some deep breaths, like do a little bit of going within and allowing. And I feel like that's the space you're kind of living in. And I so appreciate that. And I feel like we all could benefit and value from that. So thank you. We close out every show with what I call a dot or a drop of thought, a little pearl of wisdom. So I guess from your perspective, and then I'll close out with mine, which I always share, but what is the one maybe you want to leave, one parting thought for everyone?
Know that your personal power and the process of becoming personally empowered is one of the best choices you can make in your life, and you can utilize your values to help you get there. And sometimes putting heads in the sand, like you said, actually it hurts because it's really not in alignment with our deepest values. Invest in yourself more than anything. Use this time of Corona to use the quiet of the world and the lack of travel to focus on your values. And so when everything does start to reopen, you can actually come out a different person and bring what you've gained over this time into the world. That's been my goal this time, and I hope that for all of humanity.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, again, thank you. My drop of thought for the world is that, and it really it's so in harmony with what we're talking about today, but ripples don't flow in, they flow out. If we really want to see change out in our world, it's going to start with us. It's going to start in our own homes with our own families. So just go hug your family, love on them, but make sure that because it's not about just what you do at the kitchen table. It's about how you show up in the world individually and together. So be the ripple of positive energy out into the world. Anyway, thank you so much, Alexandra. It's great having you. We'll have you back, I feel like, or we'll do some quick stuff inside of the Family Connection Challenge, which reminds me, come over and join us at Family Connection Challenge. We're always putting in great stuff, doing challenges. We just did a kindness ninja challenge. There's a value. Go out and be kind. So anyway, thanks again. And until next time, everyone, thank you for being here.